Hello everybody, this is the second Necromancer video. I've already done the tank, now we're here with the other support class, the Necromancer Healer. They're still very viable, very fun to play, they offer very strong heals, and they can also help, for example, with the Colossus uptime if you don't have enough DPS Necromancers in your group. Or if you're in a proc group, they can help with the Res Ultimate, which comes in really handy if you're trying to beat veteran dungeons or hard modes, or veteran trials on hard modes the first time. So all in all, still a great class to heal on. Let's get right into the character sheet here. Just quickly put the potion on and the intensive mender. You'll see our magicka recovery is 2500, even over that, which is really great. Spell damage is 2200, which isn't too bad either. We've got a huge magicka pool of almost 33k. Our health pool is amazing as well with 20k. It's really hard to die if you've got that much health. And then stamina, we've got about 12k. We're using 64 points into magicka here. You don't really need any health or stamina since the pools are that good already. And I'm using the Atronach Mundus on this, which boosts me up to 2500 magicka recovery, which is great for casting all our skills, which can get quite expensive. However, if you're a more experienced Necromancer Healer, and you'll notice that you only recast your spells or heals or everything when they need to be recast, and you don't overcast them, you don't cast them too early. You can also go with the Ritual Mundus Stone, which will drop your magicka recovery down to about 2100, 2200. But you should be fine with that, and your heals will get even stronger. So for beginners or people that like to cast a lot of skills and don't really have the uptimes in their head yet, I would recommend using the Atronach Mundus Stone, but if you're a bit more experienced on it, you can go with the Ritual as well and just see how you get along with your magicka recovery. For food, we're using Witch Mother's Potent Brew because we get extra health as a Necromancer anyway, so this will be an extra 287 magicka recovery. And, well, the health pool with 20k is perfect as it is. So is the max magicka pool. So you can easily run Witch Mothers and get a bit more recovery out of that. Alright, for the race, let's get into that, because I know my first couple builds have been a Breton, because I was counting on the magicka recovery and skill cost reduction, but you don't really need to be a Breton. I've played a lot on this character lately, and there is... your magicka recovery and magicka pool is so good that it's better in terms of healing output to be an Argonian actually, because you get the Life Mender passive, which increases all of the healing done by 6%, which is very nice. You also get an extra max health added to the max health that you get from being a Necromancer, which is why we get up to 20k health almost. You get disease resistance and immunity to the status effect. Plus, it also increases your max magicka by 1000, and when you drink a potion, any potion, so it can be a trash pot if you want, you get 4000 health, magicka, and stamina. So the whole thing with roll dodging and general surviving and survivability is just really nice on an Argonian. Plus, mainly, your healing output is increased by, healing done is increased by 6%, which is a very nice thing to have as a healer. So this is why I opted to go for Argonian in this patch. So the skills, first up is Energy Orb. This comes from the Undaunted skill line. Starts out as Necrotic Orb, morph it to Energy Orb. And what it does is it floats around the room and heals everybody who passes by for 1k every half second. And then allies can also activate the Healing Combustion synergy, which will... restore almost 4k magicka or stamina to your allies, which is the main reason people use this, and it will also give them a burst heal for 7k. Next up from the Restoration Staff skill line is Illustrious Healing. This starts out as Grand Healing. First thing you unlock, morph it to Illustrious Healing, and this is just an AoE heal basically, which heals all the allies for almost 2k every 1 second for 12 seconds. It looks like this. Just cast it on the ground, it's this glowing circle, and it lasts for 12 seconds, and then when it runs out you can recast it. The Energy Orb looks like this. It just floats around the room and heals everything it passes by, and people can synergize it. Next up are two Necromancer skills. First one from the Living Death skill line, Blood Sacrifice. This is your burst heal. This will heal an ally in front of you, or you, for 11k health, but it will also put Minor Defile on yourself for seconds, reducing your healing received. So you should use it when you know you're safe. Like, maybe don't use that burst heal when you know that there's a huge meteor or comet or a huge situation where you take a lot of damage incoming. However, the 4 seconds pass by really fast. You can see it here in the buff timers down there. 3, 2, 1, gone. So it's not the end of the world. It's still a pretty strong burst heal, and I still love using it. Plus, when there's a corpse on the ground, you can heal another target with it as well, so it gets stronger and can heal 2 people. Next up, also from Living Death, is the Intensive Mender. This starts out as Spirit Mender. We want to morph it to Intensive Mender. The other morph would last 16 seconds. This one only lasts 8 seconds, but there is a reason for that. Because this one heals you or the lowest health ally every 2 seconds, restoring over 8k health, and it also creates a corpse on death. It looks like this, plus our Magicka recovery, which is in the passives, is increased. So you want to always have that up. You pretty much want to cast this guy every 8 seconds. And then every time he falls down, you have a corpse on the ground, which you can then use to consume for either your burst heal or other skills that we have on the back bar. So always try to have this guy up. I know it's a bit of a drag to recast him every 8 seconds, but it's very important because it also increases your Magicka recovery by quite a substantial amount. Next up is Combat Prayer. This is again from the Resto Staff skill line. Starts out as Blessing of Protection. Morph it to Combat Prayer, and what this does is it creates a healing field which heals allies in front of you, and more importantly grants them Minor Berserk and Minor Resolve, increasing all their damage done by 8% and their physical and spell resistance by 1300 for 8 seconds. So this only lasts 8 seconds as well, like the Spirit Mender. So you definitely want to see that you cast this every 8 seconds, and it will go up to 6 targets that are in front of you. So if this was my ally, stand behind them and give them a damage boost, a bit of healing, and resistance boost as well. Then on the front bar for extra mag recovery and an unstoppable shield, pretty much we're running Reviving Barrier. This is from the PvP skill line Support. And what this does is it creates like a ward. It's pretty big radius of 12 meters, and everybody inside of it will get a damage shield that absorbs up to 27k damage for 30 seconds, and it will also heal them for 17k over the next 15 seconds. So this is very, very good if there's a situation where there's a lot of damage incoming, like if you're in the execute phase in Ethereal Archive, or there's a lot of situations where this comes in really handy. Plus it costs 250 ultimates, so it's fairly easy to get back, and you can shield people when there's a lot of incoming damage all the time. It's very, very strong. And also from the passives in the support skill line, we'll get more Magicka recovery for having it slotted. So this is our front bar. It's very strong. On the back bar, the first thing we've got is Elemental Drain. This comes from the Destruction Staff skill line because we're using a Lightning Staff on the back bar. Elemental Drain, though, will put Major Breach on an enemy for 23 seconds, reducing their spell resistance. Only the spell resistance, so if you're running with a group of Staminas, you might not even need this one, and you could slot something else instead. And it also applies Minor Magic Steal, so when allies cause damage to the boss, they will restore 300 Magicka every 1 second, which really helps out sustain in Magicka heavy groups. So this is a very good thing to have as well. Next up from the Living Death skill line again is Enduring Undeath. This is a healing field, and it is a burst heal unless you have a corpse on the ground, so it will heal everybody for almost 7k health when you cast it. But if there are corpses on the ground, it will stay there for 5 seconds, and you can consume up to 5 additional corpses with each cast, and they will extend the duration of the healing field that's on the ground by 5 seconds then. So it would look like this: 7k burst heal, bam, all in this area. But if you have a corpse, which is why we're running the Intensive Mender, so every 8 seconds we can also consume the corpse of the Mender and create this healing field that will actually stay on the ground, and it also looks pretty cool. Now, next up is Overflowing Altar. This is from the Undaunted skill line. First thing you unlock. Morph it to Overflowing Altar. It costs 4,000 health, so be aware of that. Don't cast it when you're low on health, because you'll kill yourself, probably. But what it does is people can activate the Blood Feast synergy, healing themselves for 65% of the max health, and it will also put minor lifesteal on enemies. So every 1 second, when your allies are damaging something that's within the radius of 28 meters, they will restore 748 health. It looks like this. And the altars on the ground, and everything that's in the radius of it will be afflicted with minor lifesteal. Okay, next up is a bit of a flex slot, but I do like running this one. This is from the Bone Tyrant skill line, and it's called Agony Totem. You can morph it from Bone Totem. And what it does is, it puts a totem on the ground. I'll quickly show you what it looks like. It's in this circle area here with the totem. And the totem will give every one of your allies who's inside that circle minor protection, reducing their damage taken by 8%. So that's the first thing it's very useful for. And then also, after 2 seconds, the totem will begin fearing enemies, which will cause them to cower in place for 4 seconds. So it's a bit of a ground control CC ability as well. Plus, allies can activate the Pure Agony synergy, causing the enemies inside the totem's area to take magic damage and applying minor vulnerability to them, increasing the damage taken by 8%. So this is a nice source of minor vulnerability if you don't have a warden with you running the Fetcher Flies, for example. And you can use it, either put it on the boss and give them minor vulnerability, or you can put it on your allies and give them minor protection. The only thing you have to look out for is it will fear the enemies in that circular area in place. So if the tank is trying to stack things up over there and you're fearing them in place over here, you might piss the tank off a little bit. So just be aware of that. But once you know, you can pretty much handle it and not get into trouble with anything. Alright, the last thing we're running on the normal skills in the back bar is obviously Elemental Blockade. This is the morph of Wall of Elements, and what this does is it will put a barrier down in front of you, dealing magic damage every 1 second. But more importantly, the Blockade of Storms, which it is since we're using a lightning staff, sets concussed enemies off balance. So you can get that off balance effect, causing the enemies that are off balance then to take more damage from you. And then we have our ultimate, obviously, from the Assault skill line. We're running the Aggressive Horn. We're running this mostly because it will give major force to your allies, increasing the critical damage done by them by 15% for 10 seconds. So this is a very nice damage boost as well. And it'll also increase their resources, max magicka and max stamina by 10% for 30 seconds. But mostly you're blowing your war horn when you need a lot of damage in the next 10 seconds, and everybody's crit damage is increased by 15%, which is quite a big amount. Okay, other skills. Let's stay with the ultimates for a second. Obviously, you can use the Glacial Colossus. That is, if your group doesn't already have good uptime on it, which would probably happen if you had about 3 Necromancers in your group. Then you could put the Colossus ultimate on and deal frost damage with 3 smashes that it does when it comes out of the ground. But more importantly, everything it hits will be affected with major vulnerability, which will increase the bosses or adds damage taken by 30%. So this is a very, very huge damage boost. This is why people like to run Necromancers in raid groups. And if your group is short on Necromancers, you could run this as well, unless you knew you definitely needed a barrier or a warhorn. But mostly there's 2 tanks and another healer in the group anyway, so it might be enough if 3 of them run warhorn and you run the Colossus, for example. Another nice thing you can use is the renewing animation. This is your res ultimate. This is a pretty big circle with a range of 28 meters and radius of 12 meters. And this will resurrect 3 allies at once, plus you restore 5,300 magicka or stamina for each ally you attempt to resurrect. So if you know that you're in a proc group and that people are likely to die, this is definitely a good thing to have because you can get them up a lot faster. and carry on with the content that you're trying to complete. Alright, let's quickly look into other skills that are useful. Unnerving Boneyard is something you could use to afflict enemies in an area of effect with major breach and fracture. Usually the tanks do that for you. This reduces the enemy's spell and physical resistance, makes it easier to burn bosses and add pulls to the ground. Plus it also gives a synergy, so this would be a skill you could, for example, use instead of Agony Totem if you wanted to. Summoner's Armor isn't really too important. It would give you major resolve, and it would also reduce the cost of your Skeletal Mage or your Spirit Mender. This is the one we're using. However, it's not really worth running it in my opinion, because mostly you'll have a Warden in the group that will already give you major resolve, and then it's not completely necessary to have that on. Necrotic Potency is a nice skill, because this will allow you to suck ultimate from corpses that are on the ground. So if it's a dungeon or something with a lot of adds, and you need a lot of Colossuses or Warhorns, and you want to have more ultimate faster, you could definitely run this and then drain all the corpses on the ground and get your ultimate back from them. Plus, while it's slotted, your damage taken is reduced 3% also, which is a nice thing to have as well. Over here in the Living Death, we're pretty much running everything except for Restoring Tether. This you could use to heal yourself for 15k over 12 seconds, and also heal your allies between you and the corpse. While slotted, your healing done is increased by 3%. It is a nice skill, however, I didn't find it very effective, because most of the time you'll have to sort of position yourself between a corpse and your allies. No, I mean position your allies between yourself and the corpse, and that means you have to do a lot of running around, and yeah, it is nice. It sounds nice on paper, but in content I found it to not be that useful. Another thing you want to have is Crushing Shock for range interrupts. This will just interrupt enemies and also set them off balance if they are interrupted while they're casting something. In the rest of stuff skill line, it's a good thing to have Radiating Regeneration. This comes in very handy in some trials. And then also Healing Ward, which is also very handy in certain trials, say Veteran Sunspire, when you have to heal the ice. Alright, so much for the skills. I think that's about it. Yep. Inner Fire I've only got because sometimes healers are supposed to taunt things, but that's more of an endgame thing, I suppose. And then Efficient Purge is nice to have for stuff like Halls of Fabrication, when you need to cleanse negative effects from your group members. Yeah, so much for that. Okay, let's take a real quick look into the passives. The Gravelord passives are mostly for dealing damage. However, Reusable Parts is very nice, because when your Spirit Mender dies, the cost of your next Spirit Mender is reduced by 50%, so that makes it easy to keep it up every 8 seconds. This is just for critical strikes, it's not too important. This is for physical and spell penetration, so I would get that because you do a little bit of damage with a healer. And then this increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 15%, so I definitely get that as well. This is more of a tanking skill line, the Bone Tyrant one. Whenever you are in combat and an enemy dies within 28 meters of you, restore 200 magic or stamina. This is actually very helpful for us, but it only counts if you have a Bone Tyrant ability slotted. So this would technically only count on your back bar, because that is the only place where we have one slotted. However, it can happen, it can help to restore magicka and stamina, so I would get it anyway. Reduce the damage taken from damage over time abilities while you have a Bone Tyrant ability active. So this is definitely good to have as well, because the Agony Totem lasts for quite a while. Increases your healing received for each one slotted. This is also only on your back bar. And then Last Grasp, just randomly increase your max health by 1,250. This is definitely also good to have, because max health is always good for any kind of class. Living Death, this is where it gets interesting. While you have a negative effect on you, your healing done is increased by 8%. So this is definitely a good thing to have, because oftentimes you do get negative effects on you. While you have a Living Death ability slotted, your crit chance with healing abilities is increased up to 20% in proportion to the severity of the target's wounds. Definitely also good to have. Then this is for ultimate regeneration, the corpse consumption. Whenever you use a ability on a corpse, You do that quite often with your Enduring Undeath back healing thing, or even also with your Blood Sacrifice or Agony Totem, I think, as well. And then this is very important for us. While the Spirit Mender is active, the Magicka recovery is increased by 200. So all of these are very important as well. You obviously want all of the passives in the Resto and Destro Staff skill lines, since those are your main two weapons. You also want all of the ones in the Light Armor skill line. Medium Armor, you only really need Windwalker and Athletics. And then Heavy Armor, you only need the first 3, because the last 2 are only for wearing 5 pieces or more of Heavy Armor. You don't really need anything here. Banish the Wicked can be very nice when you get ultimate back when you kill an undead Daedra werewolf. Undaunted, you definitely want both of these, because we are wearing 5 heavy, 1 medium, and no, we are wearing 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy. And this will up our max health, stamina, and magicka, and also the amount of resources we get back from taking a synergy. Support, you only need this passive here. Your Magicka recovery is increased by 5/10% if you're at rank 9. And that will be the case because we're running Reviving Barrier on the front bar. Obviously you want all of your racial passives for being an Argonian or a Breton. You can still play this in a Breton, obviously. And then here medicinal use would be nice, so your potions last a bit longer. I just haven't gotten around to level it up yet. Okay, so much for extra skills, passives, and everything. Now for potions, by the way, we're just using Magicka Trash Pods or Spell Power Pods. For hard content, I would go with the Spell Power Potions, because they up your spell damage as well. And for normal content, just run the Magicka Trash Pods, because you'll get all 3 resources back anyway. Now, the gear. Healer gear is always very depending on the content. So what we're running here is pretty much a normal setup that you can do anything with, unless you're asked to wear something else, obviously. The Master's Resto Staff empowered with a weapon and spell damage enchant. This is for healing, and what the Master's one does is your Grand Healing will return Magicka and Stamina, so resources, to group members. Grand Healing is this here, the Illustrious Healing. And this will then give them resources back. And you can overcast it as well. It usually lasts for 12 seconds. They will only get resources back for 4 seconds, so if they're whining about not having enough Magicka, just cast it every 4 seconds for a couple times and give them some extra resources back. The next set is still Oloreems. Spell Power Cure is pretty much as strong as this now in most content, but I prefer Oloreems because you can just 1-bar it. And if I wanted to run Spell Power Cure, I'd probably have to run it on the body pieces and then use something else like Hollow Fangs only on the back bar. But this just works very nice for me. And yeah, we have a Shock Enchant in charged, so our chance to apply Concuss / Off Balance is increased by 220%. We get Magicka Recovery, Minor Aegis, reducing our damage taken from Trial and Arena and Dungeon monsters. Another Magicka Recovery bonus, and then casting an ability that leave an effect on the ground will create a Circle of Might for 5 seconds. You and the group members in the circle gain Major Courage for 20 seconds, increasing your weapon and spell damage for 20 seconds. This effect can occur every 10 seconds. So this has been slightly altered. The circle is now only on the ground for 5 seconds, and you can recast it every other 5 seconds, so every 10 seconds in total. But the buff lasts for 20 seconds, so if after 5 seconds you wait 5 seconds and do another circle, you can still get most of the group with the buff anyway. Now this looks like the following. We'll need to be in combat. Wait, let me take the piece of the other set off so you don't get confused. So we need to be on the back bar, cast a ground ability, and be in combat. So let's attack one of these guys. Do this, and then that circle you see is Oloreems, that yellow one. And the people who run through it or pass it by, well, they have to run through it, they have to actually touch it, will get the Minor Courage, no, is it Major Courage buff for 20 seconds then. Yeah, Major Courage, obviously. So, the staff encharged with a shock enchant, and then the jewelry all in arcane with spell damage enchants. We don't need any more Magicka recovery on the jewelry. Our Magicka recovery is awesome as it is. Now the second set, you've already seen that, is Winter's Respite here. I really like this on a Necromancer Healer because it gives you more mag recovery, 2 Magicka bonuses, and every 10 seconds you can create this circle of ice on the ground, which will heal everybody by 2,800 every 1 second while they're inside of the circle, and it can occur every 10 seconds. You can have 100% uptime on this. And this looks like that. You just need to do any ground ability. It can even be your Wall of Elements. And you create this big circle here, which will heal everybody for almost 3k every 1 second for 10 seconds. And then as soon as it runs out, you can recast it straight away, and it'll be there. Now this helps a lot, because as a Necromancer, we only really have the Illustrious Healing, the Comic Prayer, and the Enduring Undeath, which is a burst though, unless you have a corpse on the ground. So this helps out quite a bit with Magicka recovery and ground heals. It's not an endgame set. People in endgame groups will probably ask you to run Hollow Fang, but we'll get into optional sets in just a second. The monster set we're using, 1 heavy, 1 medium, is Symphony of Blades. This adds 4% healing done, and when you heal an ally who is 50% under their primary resource, you grant them Meridia's Favor, which restores Magicka or Stamina every 1 second for 6 seconds. Now, this only needs to be run by 1 person in the group really, so if the tank or the other healer is already wearing it, you can wear something else instead. My top choices would probably be Sentinel of Rakugams or Botgun the Night Flame for extra healing. So we can put Botgun on here as well, which would then give you a Magicka bonus and leave a healing totem on the ground for even more AoE ground heals. It's also a very nice set as a healer. But I prefer Symphony. 1 person in the group should run it. It makes sustain a lot easier. Now for the glyphs and everything on the armor, the big pieces we're running in Infused, meaning the head, chest, and legs, and all of that with Tri-Stat glyphs on them. And then all the small pieces in Divines with Magicka glyphs on them. Alright, so Winter's Respite is just nice for all kinds of content, but obviously there are so many sets that you should have as a healer. If you are more in a meta group, people are probably going to ask you to wear this Hollow Fang, which will create this hemoglobin ball at a location and restore a lot of Magicka and apply minor vitality to the group members. It's a very, very strong healer set. It comes from, what's the dungeon called? Moongrave Fane. So if you have a chance to farm Moongrave, it's definitely advisable to have this one as well. Cold Harvest is a nice beginner set since it's crafted. You could run this on the body if you're just starting out and you don't have any set. Maybe someone in your guild can craft your Cold Harbors for you. And this is also a nice set because it will spawn Cadwell's Mount and do a healing circle that heals for quite a big amount of 20k over 6 seconds. It can also be a damage circle though, depending on the ability you cast it with. Heat Tease is nice to have. It's sort of a ground healy thing as well, but I prefer Winter's Respite by now because it can proc more often, pretty much in 100% uptime, and the heal is stronger as well. Obviously there's the Martial Knowledge Zen's build, which I wouldn't necessarily run on a Necromancer because we don't have that many dots in our class repertoire. Infallible Letha used to be a really good healer set, but nowadays people get that minor vulnerability from other sources, mainly Warden healers with their Fetcher Flies, or even Necro healers with the Agony Totem. Yorvils is still a great set. Also adds a lot of Magicka recovery and healing done, plus all your major buffs and minor buffs and damage shield have an increased duration of 40%, so that is a great set to wear as well. Navintaz isn't really used much. Olorims we already have on the staff. Mending is pretty good to have since it will lower the enemy's weapon and spell damage for 5 seconds, so it's a good damage reduction set of incoming damage, like mitigation. It's also a great thing to have. Robe of the Healer is not really necessary to have. I just have it because it dropped in the right traits and I thought I'd keep it, why not. Worm Cult is very nice for Magicka groups because it will reduce it will grant 140 Magicka recovery for you and your whole raid group within 28 meters of you. So that can help people out with their Magicka sustain. It's probably not as good as Hollowfang in terms of Magicka sustain, but if you can't get Hollowfang because you don't have the DLCs, you can run Warm Cult as well. Twilight Remedy is a bit outdated, especially now with the new Medusa set coming in, where people don't even need to run Barb Trap anymore. It used to be quite nice if you ran with a lot of sorcerers that didn't have bar space for Barb Trap, but now it's not really necessary anymore. And then Winter's Respite, obviously the set we're wearing just for extra ground heals. I really like the set, plus you can just buy it or farm it. It's an overland set that drops in Skyrim, and it's really cheap at the guild traders as well, so it's easy to get in the right trades. Okay, so Winter's Respite for any kind of content, probably Hollowfang if you're running with an endgame group, and Yorvolts if you wanted your buffs to last longer, or Mending if you need a bit of damage mitigation. Warm Cult if you're running with mainly Magickas who suffer from bad sustain. That's pretty much your options here. Monster set options we've already gone over. Botgun, Sentinel, and Symphony are my favorite helmets at the moment. They're probably the ones that bring the most to the group. Chokethorn is nice if you want to just heal one person, like if you're kiting behind the tank in Vaz. So is Earthgore. It will also only heal one person, but for a huge amount of 37k, so if you're the healer that's designated to take care of the tank, that's also a very nice set to run. And then Lord Warden, I don't even know why I have that on here, but it gives everybody increased physical and spell resistance. It can be nice in things like, I don't know, I think I once used it in ESO when we were fighting the Lamia boss, because people kept dropping like flies, and it did make a bit of a difference in the end. But yeah, so much for that. Now let's quickly get into the champion points, and then we should be done with this build video as well. 72 Ironclad, 16 Spell Shield, 51 Thick Skin, 56 in both Hardy and Elemental Defender, 19 in Quick Recovery, 44 in Warlord, 75 in Tenacity and Arcanist, 56 in Tumbling, 20 in Shadow Ward, 75 Blessed, and then 81 Elfborn, 49 Elemental Expert, and 11 Spell Erosion. Then I've got 14 into Staff Expert just for the heavy attacks with the resto stuff, and 40 into Thaumaturge for the Elemental Blockade, pretty much. Okay, so much for this. If you're a Necro Healer, let me know what setup you're running or what skills you're running. It's always good to hear from people who actually use the classes. And yeah, looking forward to hear from you. I hope you did enjoy this. This is how I play the Necro Healer in the Stonethorn patch, and I hope you have a good day. See ya.